I want to discuss the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who was charged with espionage in Russia at the end of March. When you first heard that allegation, tell us, what did you think?
There were lots of thoughts. The immediate one was how serious the charge was. And it was, we are used to Russian authorities charging journalists with all sorts of crimes, especially in recent years, especially in the past 12 or 13 months since the start of the full-scale invasion. But the espionage charge in regards of an American journalist was something new.
Can you put this more into context for us? You said that these charges were ramping up, but why specifically Evan, and why now? Does this have anything to do with worsening tensions between the US and Russia and the West as a whole?
It definitely has to do with the relationships of Russia and the Western countries, particularly the United States, but it also has to do with the state of press freedom in Russia. As I said, in the past 12 or 13 months, the Russian authorities have practically eliminated all independent media. And it was just a matter of time before they would turn their attention from local independent reporters to foreign correspondents based in Russia. So Evan is one of the biggest cases. There have been other cases of foreign journalists, particularly European journalists, who did not get their accreditations extended and had to leave Russia. But the espionage charge is the first one since the Cold War. And speaking about the relationships between Russia and the West, when you look at the Russian pro-Kremlin media, they report about the conflict in Ukraine as if it's not the war against the Ukrainian authorities, it's not the fight for the Ukrainian territories only, but it's the fight against the West, or as they usually use the term Anglo-Saxon countries or civilization even. So this is the fight as they see it against the United States, the UK, other European countries, the NATO in general.
According to the Associated Press, Evan will be behind bars in a Moscow prison called Lefortovo. What do we know about that prison? What do we know about the conditions he's facing? And in general, do we know how he's doing?
His lawyers were able to see him last week on Tuesday, but he hasn't had a consular access, although this is his right. And it's the Russian authorities that have been preventing the U.S. embassy and consulate members to see Evan Gershkovich in violations of his rights. When the lawyers, Russian lawyers, were able to see him, they said that he was in good spirits, he was joking, probably, he was probably thinking about his parents, who are obviously very concerned about him. The Lefortovo detention center is one of the strictest in Moscow. It's notorious for its conditions, and we've spoken to some other former inmates of Lefortovo, including journalists, and they said that the worst thing about it is that the authorities try to isolate a person who is there. So one journalist described the conditions there as, complete isolation in a small cell, 3 by 3 meters, or not much bigger, in which an inmate spends 23 hours and 1 hour during the day he is allowed to walk outside, but not to communicate. And also when the lawyers met with Evan Gershkovich, they said it was in the presence of the third person. Even if there is no one physically present when they are meeting, the conversations are probably going to be recorded. So it's not like Evan's, basic rights are going to be respected in Russia.
That sounds psychologically taxing, those conditions that you've just described. But can we trust what, in your experience, can we trust what these Russian lawyers are saying? Because that complete isolation sounds grim, to put it lightly, but they're saying that he's laughing. Do we believe that? Can we believe what they're saying?
You know, I trust the journal because they've had people, including the chief of the bureau there, and Evan worked there. But it's very difficult to find a lawyer who would be willing to defend an American journalist charged with espionage in the first place. Because in recent years, a lot of lawyers have fled Russia for the same reasons. A lot of journalists have fled Russia because they were independent. They were defending clients who had anti-Kremlin views. And as far as I understand, it wasn't easy for the journal to find a local lawyers who would be willing to defend Evan Gershkovich. And as to the trust, I think we have to wait and see how the procedure goes. Also, don't forget that we're not talking about a country with the rule of law here. It's a very political case. So what these lawyers can do, they can follow certain procedural steps, the basic ones. For example, they appealed against the detention itself, but they can't do much because, especially because this is an espionage case, and because of how the Russian state media have portrayed Evan as if he was already a convicted spy, I don't think the lawyers will have really a chance to defend Evan according to even the Russian legislation and the constitution. I think the Russian state media already convicted Evan, even from the way they have been reporting about him, and even high-level Russian government officials have spoken about Evan as if he was already convicted. So it's just a matter of some procedural, I would say, technicalities that the lawyers can have control over.